The City Council. David Kippen, who represents Aviva Brands, will be making a presentation regarding some marketing and branding that we're doing for the city. Our Economic Development Director, Kwame Reed, will introduce him and what he'll be telling us about, and then we'll turn it over to David.
Good evening, Council. I promise that there won't be any numbers in this presentation. There's been a lot of numbers tonight, so I promise there won't be any in this one. As I said, good evening. We have embarked in this rebranding process for about 9 months now. As we've been coming up to the creative portion of the endeavor, it was something of an importance that the consultant Aviva Brands brought forward to us, saying, you know, we're doing a lot for the rebranding. Now it's time for us to look at one of the most important things that a city has, and its logo. So tonight you will see 4 examples of what's called a word mark. They're not really a logo, but I'll let David talk about the differences and everything that's going to go forward from here on tonight. I don't want to say too much because I know this is a very long agenda. But with that, I'll turn it over to David, and I will turn the screen on for you. So here's David Kippen.
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you, Mayor Wright, members of the City Council. So before we get started, and I promise I won't talk about Fed's fund rate, and I will try not to make this unnecessarily complicated, but I do want to set the table with a couple of things to keep in mind before I dive into what we're talking about when we talk about logos. So in general, when you think about a trademark, you think about a variety of different things, but there actually are, broadly speaking, 2 flavors to the work you're going to see tonight. One of them is called a word mark, that is pure typography. If you think of the Coca-Cola logo, for example, that's a traditional word mark. It's a highly stylized writing of the word Coca-Cola. The other is a trademark or a brand mark. Think of the Nike swoosh, right? It's the word Nike, but it's also a mark next to Nike. So if you're doing something like what the city has had to this point, where it's City of Antioch, gateway to the Delta, and you have a little picture with it, you have both more latitude and more storytelling. If you work with a word mark, what you really have is the word. Now, I'll explain later why we've moved away from the mark with the features that the city is currently using. But for now, I think it's important to understand that there are 3 things we can play with in creating a word mark. They're basically the typeface, or think of it as the font, the color scheme, which is the color of the mark itself, both when it's present and when it's reversed, which is to say when it's white on the opposite color. And the third is, we call them special characters, but it's basically ways you can alter letters or parts of the typeface. Generally, the rules are you stay within the typeface, so if you want to do a squiggle or something else, you want to reach inside the font to do that. That probably sounds pretty esoteric, but I'll explain what it means and how it works as we move along. So the first example I'm going to give you, and as Kwame said, there are 4 of them, is this first option, which is we have 3 adjectives for each of them. We think of this one as, well, it's a custom mark because we've taken a typeface and we've changed it quite a bit. The goals of the changes we've made are to position the city as a contemporary city, that is a city that's leaning forward and not leaning back, and to position the city as a bold city. Now that might sound like a big claim to truth, but one of the things you're going to see is I'm going to put each of these into Congress with other cities' marks. And so if you think about the concept of boldness next to, well, you'll see, for example, Fremont, and you'll see Oakland. You'll see that this mark stacks up as quite bold. If I can turn. So here we go. Here is the first mark. Let me ask you before we go on, do you have color printouts or black and white? Color, okay. So for those of you in the audience today, the colors are going to be a little bit off because this is projected, but the colors on your printout should be relatively accurate. So this is the simplest, most straightforward mark and lockup. The lockup meaning that we have the line opportunity lives here. tied to the line in a way that won't change. So every time you see the word Antioch, you will see either Antioch, opportunity lives here, which will be the most common deployment, or you might in some settings see Antioch, California, or City of Antioch. But whether it's the strapline opportunity lives here or one of those others, they will always be locked with the city in the same way. As I said, this is a modified typeface. It exists in the world, but what we've done with this face is accentuate some of the type features that we think make it the characteristics I mentioned before. Let me put this into a little bit more context for you. Here you see it both in color and in reverse, and you'll see both in color and in reverse. It's quite a strong mark. It has a presence, but I think you'll see it best when we put it into play as a business card. We would anticipate, if you selected this mark, we'd anticipate a lot of color. We'd anticipate, though, that most of the time the mark would stay on a white field. Most of the time it wouldn't play in reverse. So, for example, if you see it with other cities, it would look something like this. And I think this is where you get the best sense of how this mark works. So if you compare Antioch to, we selected these marks to be different and sort of provide an array of relevant cities. So if you compare this to Fremont, you'll see that Fremont has a very nice serif font under a stylized set of three hills with City of. It's not the most contemporary thing in the world, but it's not ancient. As opposed to Redwood City, there are still a lot of marks out there that look like they were made in the 1970s, very serviceable, but they don't say we're moving forward. From a design standpoint, you see there's a spectrum here from Antioch and City of Fremont, which are just word marks, to the City of Oakland, which is a much more designed mark, and somewhere in the middle is the City of Oakley. So this is the first selection, the first choice. Let me take you through the next one. This mark is quite different. It's a mark that conveys the idea of intelligence. It's a very modern mark, and we think it's also a very optimistic mark. It speaks to what we talk about when we talk about opportunity. You'll see it's also a stylized mark. So earlier I spoke about special features. In this case, you'll see that the tilde, which is that wiggly thing you can use, it's kind of like a hyphen, but it wiggles. The tilde has been modified to create sort of a water effect here below an O. The idea, and it's quite a lovely O and quite a lovely yellow in the O and a lovely contrast to the blue. I hope your printouts show that. But this symbolizes a rising sun over the delta, over the water, and that's reflected in the line opportunity lives here as well. You see both the orange of the O and the mark under the water are carried to the word opportunity. Let me show you how that plays in a couple of other settings. Here it is in color and in reverse. Now, unlike the prior mark, we would anticipate in reverse that the O and the word opportunity would stay in a secondary color. So it wouldn't be a pure reverse out to white, because we think that's an important design message in terms of how it might play out. This is a mark that will play very nicely with white. So we would expect this mark to be used with a lot of white around it, a fairly clean design system in general. And let me put it into play with some other city marks. You can now see here it's a very different feel from the other cities. It's a very strong statement, and it powerfully underscores the idea of opportunity. It makes opportunity part of the message of Antioch much more, we think, viscerally than the prior mark does. This next mark is the same typeface, that is the same font as you saw in Mark 1, but it's modified in a couple of important ways. I think it's a hard-working, intelligent mark. Here what we've got is it's actually the word Antioch with the O It's the exact same O as in the typeface, but with small triangles cut out of it, and it's a similar effect. What we're thinking of here is the idea of sunrise, but also the idea of opportunity. I think the color contrast is a lot better on your slides. You've seen this typeface before, so let me move forward and show you what it looks like in reverse. Now, I should point out for the people who are seeing this on the screen that what you're seeing is actually a much richer purple, and the contrasting color is what we call a warm red, which is a red with some orange in it. Those are slightly antagonistic in the color spectrum, which means when they're printed right, these actually vibrate quite nicely. This is a very powerful color combination, and we think the mark and the color combination will look great, will give the city a much more contemporary feeling in its design. So one example where you can really see how the colors play together is that warm red, and I'm going to point to it here on the back of the business card, is the same warm red as here, though it looks much more muted against the purple, the sort of grape color we have in the background here. Let me put that into Congress with other city marks. And here's how Antioch would look relative to other cities. It's a very vibrant mark. And the final mark it's unique in a different way. This is a modern mark. It's a bold mark. It's minimal in that what we've done to it is just one change, one adjustment to that mark from the first mark you saw. Well, actually two if you count the color. This is the mark. Right, that's the first reaction people often have, but let me talk a little bit about why this is really interesting from a design standpoint and what you can do with it. So if you look, you'll see that there's actually a line running through the dot of the I and the center of the O into the C. What the O represents is opportunity, just as in the other marks, but we've put this with the California and opportunity lives here to give it a bit more room to breathe. What's important in this mark is the idea of opportunity lifting that O. That's what this represents, but also this diagonal line does something really interesting from a design standpoint. Most design relies on a grid system, and most grids are like a piece of paper. They go up and down, left to right. It's very boring, it's very straight, it's very conservative, it's not very interesting. Anytime you're able to create a diagonal in a design system, which this mark by itself does, you create a lot of interest in anything you design with it. So not only do you have the opportunity of designing down and to the right, which would seem to be the obvious thing to do here, but actually it gives you the opportunity to go up and to the right. So though you're seeing the mark by itself on a page, this mark really is already implying a design system that we can do wonderful things with. It would be very interesting. Here it is in the reverse. So you see how it looks in a duotone. Here's how it looks in treatment in a card, and here's how the mark sits with the other cities. It's a playful mark. It's a happy mark. It says something unexpected about the city. So there we are, 4 marks and a decision to be made. Let me give you a little bit more context about the decision. If you're able to come to a decision today, we'll be able to move the mark that you select into the advertising that we'll be launching in the next week and a half or so. If this is delayed further, we'll launch with the word Antioch. We won't be using the existing mark. We'll just use the word Antioch in a bold typeface and swap it out with the mark you select when we select that mark. But I encourage you to make a decision tonight if you can for a couple of reasons. One of them is it would be great to launch with a campaign. Second is, though this is the first time the marks have come to council, we've been back and forth to staff a number of times. We've been through a long selection process. These are all very strong marks. They'll work well, and This gives us the opportunity to go to market not just with Antioch has a campaign, but Antioch has a campaign and it's making a statement about itself in that campaign. It's rebranding, which is a much more powerful message. So let me take a breath and turn over to you, Mayor Wright. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. This item is before council. Comments? Questions? Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
Oh, this is my favorite. I like it has the symbolism of the river, which I still think is, taking into consideration our gateway to the Delta. Is it possible to put City of on there, though? Is that?
That's a great point. Yes, each of these will have a few kinds of executions. So they'll have a lockup with Opportunity Lives Here, but we will also have executions that have City of Antioch and Antioch, California used in different places. Most commonly, because we're launching an opportunity-based campaign, at least for the next year or so, you'll see it with the line Opportunity Lives Here. But yes, absolutely. And that's true for any of the marks.
It's my
Thank you. Councilmember Thorpe.
Well, since we're all hearing our opinions, okay. So I was shocked by this, the O at the top. I was,
The rising O mark.
huh?
The rising O mark.
The rising of O. it kind of took me out. But I gotta say, it grew on me after some time. And I think I'm the only one from here who literally came from a different state to California, to the city of Antioch. And so, and I'm saying recently.
Okay.
So I say that to say that in coming here, I think, my wife and I were looking, of course, for opportunity. We were looking for adventure, excitement, whatever. And many of the reasons that we came here, I feel like, are captured in the uniqueness of what this is. And to me, it kind of even represents the state of California as a place that doesn't take itself too serious. And so that's why I like that one. This gateway to the Delta, while of course I appreciate it, not that we're talking about that, but a lot of us are face more of, we tend to think of ourselves as the Bay Area, not necessarily the Delta.
Okay.
And gateway is, of course, something you cross and go to somewhere else, and we don't want people to go somewhere else. We want them to come here to the city of Antioch. So I like this fun one. I think it's exciting, and so that's kind of my thoughts about that.
Councilmember Wilson.
All right. For me, there were two I really liked. I actually liked the first one. I like how clean and simple, and to me, out of all of them, stood out the most when you had them with the other cities. And then a close second was actually the second one, the Antioch Opportunity Lives Here with the waves underneath it. Those were the two that stood out to me the most. And for me, looking at each one of these, I had to think of what was the first thing that came to mind. And some of the others, like, for example, you'll be interested, like this one right here, the first thing I thought of, I'm like, oh wow, I haven't been to Albuquerque, New Mexico in a while. Like, that was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that. So I'm like, obviously I don't want that one because it made me think of another city in another state. And I won't get into the other ones, but the other two I really like. With the first one, actually the red, the really simple, the clean, the crisp, to me that one stood out the most, not only by itself, but when you had it with the other cities. So that's my comments on the two I like the best.
Councilmember Overchop.
Okay, I'll give mine. I had a hard time when I saw the first one, and the first one that I saw was, no, that's not the first one I saw. The first one I saw was the O. So I looked at it and thought, no. We don't know how to spell, we don't know how to font, we don't know how to do any of that. So I understand the chuckles out there, because that was kind of my thought. I understand, and it was explained to me, Gateway to the Delta, that has been the theme. Of course, it's an old theme, grew up here. So it was explained to me that it is going through, so I understand what that's about. But to me, our river is a gem. It's a huge part of Antioch. So when they showed me the rest of them, such as Mayor Pro Tem Motz and Councilman Wilson, Antioch, when I saw it, I thought of the water underneath the O and underneath the other O. But then when you explained it with the sun rising over the water, you got me on that one. So I really like that idea of the sun rising over the water, but I kind of lost the sun rising with an orange. So is there a reason behind the color schemes that you picked? So.
There are a couple of technical reasons. When you try to print a yellow is a very hard color to work with. It's a hard, for yellow to work, it has to be a very dark yellow. Otherwise, when you try to put it in any kind of consistent print system that is on paper, on the sides of cars, on the sides, whatever, it ends up all over the place. Also, if yellow is too light, it ghosts, it disappears, it becomes kind of invisible. So if we're using any kind of yellow, we have to, even though it's a sunrise, we have to use kind of a sunset yellow. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
So the orange, though, why orange? Just because it's bright, vibrant?
Burnt yellow. I think, are you talking about this mark here?
Yes.
I'd call that a very warm yellow, a dark yellow. I wouldn't say it's a strong orange. It's sort of mid-range.
Okay. That's my choice.
Well, I sat down, David and I met this morning, and I said, I'm okay with all four of them, David. So as we sit here and talk, I honestly am with Lamar. I think I like the rising O best, but I have no problem with if the majority want to go with the one with the delta in it and the rising sun. I don't have a problem going there as well. So if that's kind of the consensus, it sounds like Monica and Joy.
The women have spoken.
The women have spoken. Lamar, are you okay with that one?
I'm not fighting the women.
So, it sounds like we're all okay with the water with the rising sun. I think we kind of talked about this being looks like the Broncos colors for those of us that are football fans with the orange. I guess we just leave it into your.
We can warm that up. We can warm it into a darker, a lighter yellow. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Leave it into your capable professional hands. But I think you hear our sentiment.
I do.
With the color. So. Anything else before we move on?
Do you need a vote? Is that it?
You can't make fun of us for liking one we're not even picking. Come on.
The only thing, the one with the O a little bit higher up, and Ron's gonna laugh because when I first saw the picture, I'm like, why is the O running away? Why is it running away? So that's why I didn't pick that one, because it looks to me like the O is like, I'm getting out. So.
No, and there will be people with ADD that sit there and just that'll bother the heck out of them. It will, because it's not lined up right. Am I wrong? OCD. That's the word.
You didn't mean to say ADD.
OCD. Yeah, I did.
So, Mayor Wright, City Clerk has just advised me that I need to have you identify that it's option 2 that you are selecting
we
as
need
a
a
council.
motion?
I don't know.
This is a presentation. So direction. I'll turn to our city attorney and then ask for.
Yeah, this is a presentation, so there's no resolution or no formal action. You're giving direction.
Can he move forward with
Yes,
direction?
he can. He can.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to a consent calendar. Are there any items which